That's right. Showtime in the University City. Welcome in, everyone. It is time for another episode of your favorite, my favorite, everyone's favorite. It's Three Guys Before the Game, and it is a continuation of our summer series. And Senator, can I get we got a dandy for you?
A nice hot streak here.
All right, yeah, we're rolling. I mean, this is just kind of like stealing. We got them going. I think I'm almost positive. Like, this guy has been the most sought-after interview. Like, you know those people that go overseas and they leave the country and then you can never find them again? That's our guest. Chuck Lillie's name has been associated with WVU football since his arrival, but the question is, what does this dude do? What's the general manager of Mountaineer football do? Your day has come. We're going to find out. Chuck's our guest, and Three Guys Before the Game is brought to us by GoMart. Get yourself a GoMart Rewards card, download the app, and immediately begin saving on your food and your fuel. It will give you good vibes. By Lou Wendell Marine Sales in St. Albans, award-winning. They sell family fun. Visit LouWendellMarineSales.com. By Tudor's Biscuit World. Start your day the homemade way with a Tudor's biscuit. And breakfast specials, also something special. Three Guys brought to us by Jan Dills, attorneys at law. They won't take no for an answer, just so they don't know what that means. Three Guys brought to us by Connolly CPA Group, providing value beyond numbers, and by WVU Medicine, the exclusive healthcare provider for all Mountaineers, including you. All right, let's jump in. All right, I might have gone over the top. I mean, like, I basically was saying,
never happens.
I may have been saying kind of like, you know those people that, like, they're foreign leaders and then they go in exile and then you can't find them, and then people are like, well, where's Chuck? Chuck's been working underground.
He's been busy. That's why we haven't had him. He's been extremely busy.
Yeah, I mean, we had some roster movement. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on here.
Do you feel that, did you know that people want to know what you talk about and what you think about and how you do your job? Do you know that?
I think I know that. I haven't, seen it or heard it. I know that, what we do is probably really fascinating to the general public, the general fan base. But yeah, I'm happy to be here, happy to talk about it. So.
Absolutely. It's good to have you. And I might be using some hyperbole when I say that, but no, it's a whole interesting world. Why is it interesting? Because your position did not exist. I mean, heck, this whole general manager terminology, I think, is still less than 5 years old, right? There were no GMs 5 years ago. So let's kind of jump back a little bit and just let folks know from whence you come, from where you have come from. So football guy throughout the course of your life, you always a football guy?
Always loved football. Honestly, interestingly enough, I did not get into college football really until I got to Clemson. I was always a pro guy. I'm from Baltimore, huge Ravens fan, so I know there's probably a lot of Yinzers, probably a lot of Steelers fan watching this. But no, grew up a big Ravens fan, and it wasn't until I got to Clemson that I really started to understand college football.
Baltimore guy, what gets you from Maryland down to South Carolina? Why Clemson to go to school?
So, funny story. I thought that I wanted to go to the University of South Carolina. So, ironically enough, I go down on a visit summer prior to my senior year and just do not wind up liking the school, don't wind up liking the visit. And my mom had enough sense about her to say, we're not just going to see South Carolina. We got to get some other visits in while we're doing this. So we drove down, and after the South Carolina visit, we went to Clemson the next day, and I just happened to fall in love with it and got lucky enough to get into school there. So long story short, that's how that came to be. Was the whole South Carolina go south thing just to get warm?
I mean, why'd you want to go south?
I don't know. I didn't want to go to University of Maryland. I just didn't have a draw there. I did have some family that went there, but I didn't have a personal draw.
Right.
And I kind of liked the Southern living lifestyle. I drove a truck. I always wanted to drive a truck. Always liked being outdoors.
We're talking pickup?
Pickup, yeah.
So you figure I slide on the Clemson campus with a pickup, I'm in.
I'll fit right in. Yeah.
You call them pickups anymore? You go pick up a lot.
What do you call it?
Well, just a truck. I mean, like Chuck just said, it's just a
there's
truck.
Different trucks. I mean, there's 18-wheelers. There's like box trucks. There's pickup trucks.
I never thought he was driving an 18-wheeler when he said it, but that's neither here nor there. Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah. So, no, I don't know. Just kind of felt drawn down there. And once I stepped foot on campus there, I didn't want to go anywhere else.
Interesting. Okay. So you get there. What's the major as a freshman? Do you know what your major? Do you go general early, or do you go, I'm majoring in what?
So I was actually communications to start. They were getting ready to put in a sports division to the communications major. So sports comm was coming, but it wasn't until my sophomore year. So my freshman and sophomore year, I was just a regular student, joined a fraternity, rushed a fraternity, but I wasn't involved until my junior year with the football team.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So
I got a late start.
So your first 2 years, you're just ding-donging around campus.
Yeah, freshman year, did the whole, rush of fraternity and was being a college student. My sophomore year, I knew I wanted to get involved. I was taking classes in, broadcast journalism and trying to figure out, okay, what's my path? Didn't know what that looked like, but I started writing letters and making phone calls and trying to find a way into either the football team or the baseball team. And I didn't have any real luck with that. So it was my junior year, probably a week before classes started. I just took myself down over to the football stadium where their operations complex was, and walked into the building, heard people talking from the floor above me, and just followed the noise. And it happened to be the recruiting office, and, somehow talked my way into it. That was really how it got started.
Wait a second, time out here. So you go, okay, I hear noise. I'm going up the steps. And you go up and you just say, hey, and then kind of everyone looks at the same time and goes, hey, my name's Chuck, and I just want to get involved.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. And talked my way into it. They didn't want to take a junior because they knew it was going to take some time to kind of learn everything and onboard. And, so I think I lied and told them that I was going to need a fifth year.
Actually, sure.
Yeah.
Fifth year.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, no, I'm really like a sophomore, right? I'm going to need this fifth year.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so convince them to, hire me. I didn't need to get paid. I didn't need class credit. I just wanted to work. And, talked my way into it, so.
Awesome.
Had you walked into the offensive line coaching room, would you be in coaching?
I don't know. Probably. I never really had the passion to coach. I always liked the front office style, recruiting personnel. I always had an interest in that. But, yeah, I think if I had walked, left instead of right when I got up to the second floor, I may have, started a career down coaching.
Ended up in a different area.
Yeah, 100%.
That's wild.
So you jump in, and they say, okay, start doing this. What's the very first thing they said? Here's your task. Do what?
Very first thing I was doing was, and this is, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a secret that still kind of goes on today.
Whoa,
but,
wait, secret. Wait, it's trade secret.
We
Hang
got,
on, what do we got?
Sending out graphics to recruits from the, either coaches' accounts or from the, main account, the football account. So that was what I was doing 2-3 days a week. Was I was coming in for 2-3 hours at a time and, just getting all the messages queued up. Nowadays, you can kind of, match the names, and there's enough technology to where that stuff takes 5 minutes. But at the time, it was all by hand. And, I think I probably had a time where, I was sending something to, John, whoever, and I sent the graphic that had the other John on there. So there was, some human error that was involved for sure.
Did you know right away, like when you got into this, like the first few hours you were in, you're like, okay, this is it. This is what I want to be doing? Or did it take a little bit?
No, I think it took a little bit. I think being involved with the team, that was what I wanted, was some sort of, team element. And, I didn't want to spend my career sending out graphics on Twitter, but that was my foot in the door.
Sure. And
I think the more I got around, hey, okay, recruiting, there's an evaluation element to it. There's a, personal aspect to it. Getting to know these players, getting to know their families, and, being a cog in the process to, help get that player, on your campus and to be a part of your team moving forward for the next 4 or 5 years and allowing you to help, chase championships. That was where I started to fall in love with it and realize, hey, okay, this is something that I
it was clear
do.
The recruiting/personnel side was in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So how do we learn the art of evaluation?
The art of evaluation. I don't think there is an art, honestly. I think it is an art, but I don't think there is a exact methodology that is a proven you do it this way. I think the biggest thing with evaluation is, you got to have things that, you look for and have an idea of how to, grade comparatively, like, what does a great player or what does a great trait look like at this position. But I think the biggest thing is a little bit of intuition and a whole lot of, gut to it, honestly. If you have conviction in evaluation, I think that's the biggest thing. I learned that at a young age, and tell all of our young guys, like, that's the biggest thing that you can show me. If you bring a player, to us or to a coach, like, you better have some conviction, because otherwise, if you don't have conviction, we start, poking holes in it and you can't defend them, then, that guy's kind of dead on arrival.
Do you have someone that took you to their side and gave you some of the insight as to what you just said? Like, how do you figure out this one's a great one, this one's maybe? Did someone take your side and teach?
I think it was a whole bunch of people, throughout my career, whether that was personnel people, coaches, NFL scouts, just I think having the ability to, just always be curious minded, always be willing to ask questions and, hey, okay, what did you like about this guy? Like, when I looked at him, I didn't see it. What did you see that you liked? Being able to admit when you're wrong and always learning, I think is a big part of that. So yeah, really everybody that I've kind of come across and spent time with in my career, has kind of helped, form me into the person I am.
So this position and this world is constantly changing, and it's evolving a lot since you even started into it. If I asked you for a 30-second elevator pitch of what you tell a recruit's parents, or what you would tell a recruit, or what you'd say to us, 30 seconds, what's your job entail? What is it?
What does my job entail?
Yeah. What's a general manager at WVU's job?
I think the big thing is salary cap management, understanding, what kind of resources that we have, making sure we deploy those and, use them as competitively as possible, as well as just the overall strategic, recruiting oversight, making sure that our board is competitive, and that if there are changes that need to take place, changes that need to occur, guys that we need to add to there, allowing the recruiting and evaluation process to take place, and for that stuff to kind of happen organically.
When you look and compare your first recruiting class here to this past year's recruiting class, what are the most significant differences in year two, having had the opportunity to do a full cycle of evaluation?
That's a great question. When you say first recruiting class, do you mean 25 or 26?
When you guys got here, you needed players.
Yeah.
So was it, hey, we got to go beg, borrow, and steal to find what's still left out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, by the time that coach had taken the job, signing day had already passed. I think we had 18 high school signees in the 25 class, and we signed, I want to say, 40-some players in that portal cycle. And you got to keep in mind the dates were different, right? So this past year, the transfer portal, I don't think officially opened until January 2nd or January 3rd. The year before it had opened, the first week of December. So I was actually still at Oklahoma. We had put the signing class together. We were putting the finishing touches on the portal class, and, happened to finish up our bowl game. I was home in Baltimore over New Year's and got a call to come down here. So, you go from having, all but I think 2 guys signed in that portal class at Oklahoma, and everybody else is kind of picking over the bunch for 3 weeks. And then I get here, I think there had been 4 players that had been signed, and, we went out and signed something like 28 guys in the next 21 days. I mean, it was a madhouse, but yeah, that's what it was a lot of picking through what was still available, and not to say that those guys weren't good players for us, but I think the approach probably would have been a little bit different. Like, we wouldn't have went out and signed 40 seniors. We had 40 seniors on last year's roster, and you don't ever want to be that top heavy. So kind of, now having a full cycle to, recruit this past year's high school senior class, and having a chance to really vet out the portal, we were able to put some strategic processes in place, to prepare for all of that. And I think we have a lot more of a well-balanced roster this year.
So let's jump into it. You said the phone call, you're at Oklahoma, and the phone call comes about what did you know about West Virginia? What was this a Zach Alley relationship? He told Rich, there's this dude at Oklahoma, he'd be the guy.
Yeah, so I guess the story there was I had heard rumblings that Zach was, considering the position here. That was when we were at our bowl site, and I didn't know if that was going to be true or not. The news breaks, I think the day after the bowl game. I had just landed in Baltimore and, saw the news all over Twitter. So I reached out to Zach and just told him congratulations. And I was happy for him. And he just said, would you be interested in coming over? And I said, well, it depends what it is. But yeah, absolutely keep me in mind and let me know what's available. And I think it was, maybe 3 or 4 days later, he said that, I think coach might be giving you a call, keep your phone on you. And typically how that works, at least in my experience, is, it's not the same day or, it might be 2 weeks later. And I was getting ready to go to the airport. I had a flight. I was going back to my truck was in Dallas.
Pickup truck.
Yeah. My pickup truck was in Dallas. And so I say, hey, I don't know when coach is going to call, but like if he calls and it goes straight to voicemail, tell him I'm interested, but I might be on a flight back to Dallas.
That was a good preemptive move right there. Well done.
Yeah. So he, sure enough, coach called, I think probably within 30 minutes of that phone call, 20 minutes before I'm supposed to head to the airport. And I'm thinking like, hey, I'll push my flight back. Like I can drive over to Morgantown. It's about 3 hours away. Thinking there's got to be some sort of interview process involved here. And he offered it to me. I think initially they were probably not going to hire a general manager, at least in the interim, get through that first month or two and kind of sort it out from there. But I think, trying to do that much overhaul in such a short period of time, I think they probably just felt like they needed one more person. And I'm lucky that I got that call.
What do you think the biggest thing you took from your Oklahoma experience that you took forward into this position?
Man, that's a great question. That was my first time being in the SEC. I'd spent 5 seasons with the team at Clemson and then 4 seasons over at Kansas State. So I'd been in the ACC, had been in the Big 12, and I think just kind of seeing the makeup of rosters in the SEC, what those body types look like, what those, rosters look like, each different position, how's that similar or different from, leagues and teams that I've kind of, mentally compared ourselves against in the past. I think that was probably the biggest thing, as obviously the SEC's had a long track record of success, winning it all and producing a lot of NFL draft picks. And there's a reason for that. Okay, what does that league look like? What do those players look like? And how do we, match up against that in order to, go out and compete at the highest level?
3 Guys Before the Game is brought to us by our friends at Gomart. And Brad, they've got a groovy new deal rolling your way here in the month of May. All you have to do is sign up for a Gomart Rewards program. Just get into the program. It's all this month of May, and you'll get 30 cents off every gallon of gas, one-time purchase, 30 cents off a gallon once you put the app on your phone, 30 cents off a gallon. Now, he drives a pickup. Now, some of those take 30 gallons.
They do.
Now, you do the math on that, and you start saving 30 cents on that per gallon, right?
Well, that's significant. Gas prices are up. So, yeah, if you can save 30 cents a gallon,
gas price up. So, absolutely download the Gomart app wherever you get your apps and take care of that. 3 Guys Before the Game is also brought to us in part by the fine folks at Tudor's Biscuit. Were you a Tudor's guy at all yet? Have you imbibed on it?
I've bought into Tudor's. I didn't know what Tudor's was until about 18 months ago.
Yeah, now you know what it is.
Big fan.
So the question we always ask guests, could you do 2?
In one sitting?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, agree.
Specialty biscuits, I don't know, but like just simple bacon, egg, and cheese, sausage, egg, and cheese.
Take 2 and 2.
You could do that. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you something else.
So
besides the regular conventional biscuits that they have that are just terrific, they also have the Super Breakfast. Super Breakfast, take a look for those of you that are watching. You get your choice of protein. You go sausage, you go bacon, eggs, any way you want them. I mean, any way you want to do them. Taters, and then that biscuit that's massive. And then on the back right side, you see that sausage grate. Now, they make that all day long. That's fresh. You can dip it with whatever you want to dip it.
Yeah, you don't want to miss the gravy back there. It's kind of tucked behind the words there, but that's an important part of that meal.
Yeah. Visit Tudor's Biscuit. Start your day the three guys way with a Tudor's Biscuit. Chuck can eat too. So now you get through the first year and you guys begin the recruitment process of what is the 26 class. And so the 26 class is now coming together, right? We've got some of these young guys here that came in January, and we'll get a few more when the school year comes to an end. Let's talk about roster composition. Firstly, from big picture thing, money-wise. You have a set amount of dollars that you guys are going to go to market with. How do you begin that process of saying, okay, is it as simple as, we're going to spend X amount of dollars on average on offense, X amount of dollars on defense, and then once you get into those positions, my quarterback, how many am I going to keep? Running back, can you kind of walk us through that world of thought?
Yeah. I think you want to try to be balanced, as it relates to offense and defense. But I think it's, I hear some programs that, try to allocate a certain amount of dollars towards the freshman signing class. And I guess I just don't necessarily agree or understand that logic. I think the way that coach wants to, run this, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, is, let's just acquire the best players that we can wherever we can get them. If that's a freshman, signee, great. If that's a guy that's already here on your roster, obviously that's the biggest part of it is making sure that our retention plans are strong. And then coming across guys in the portal, there's a reason that those guys are available, good or bad. So making sure you do your homework and understand who it is that you're bringing into your building. In the high school game, you got a lot of time to get to know a guy and what makes him tick, and who's around him in his life, what kind of influences does he have, what are the things that are ultimately going to drive his success. Whereas in the portal, you're evaluating the player, you're evaluating the production or the potential of that player, but it's hard to get to know him. So little bit of buyer beware, in the portal, and there's a lot of good that can come out of it. But I think, there's been some programs that have leaned heavily on that, and they don't have the sustained success that you're looking for in today's age.
I have an assumption that as this thing continues to grow, you will build a network of agents that you talk to. And you will have good experiences with agents, and you will feel much more comfortable in dealing with them because they recruit a certain type of player to represent. And then you will have negative experiences with certain agents because they also recruit a certain time. And over time, when that person that has had a problem in the past with you, you're just like, dude, I'm not working with you anymore. But the guy that has the kind of guys we want, I'm working. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, already there's been, again, in the last, 18 months now that I've been here, there's been plenty of interactions, both positively and negatively, dealing with representation. And it's interesting because you have your, typical licensed agents, guys that, are already representing a handful or large plethora of players, in the NFL. So they really understand what, that whole song and dance looks like. They are probably a little bit more well-equipped in terms of how to handle negotiating and how to, strategically hold their cards. But I think at the same time, they know that they're not in this to make a quick buck. So they do have to have a little bit of integrity in terms of how they operate. And there are, plenty of bad actors, licensed or not, that you realize, okay, we don't need to, entertain this type of behavior. So I think it's just, same thing, just like, recruiting a player, forming relationships, with these representatives. They're not going anywhere. And so understanding, who's going to be doing good business, what types of people or agencies are going to have, are we going to be repeat customers with them, and making sure that there's a relationship there.
As the market has matured a little bit, with still a long way to go, is there a pretty good understanding now in your mind between players, their agents, and internal folks like yourself on what market value is for certain positions? Do you feel like that's a little closer together than it was a year and a half, 2 years ago?
I think it's starting to. The difficult piece with that, I think, in our sport is it's kind of like baseball is probably the closest thing that I can point to. In professional baseball, you have a salary cap, and you also have a luxury tax. So a team like the New York Yankees is going to consistently spend above the salary cap, and they're going to pay whatever cost it takes to field the highest budgeted team that they can afford year in, year out. And some teams just don't have the ownership to spend up to that. I think that's kind of where college football is right now. Is you have some teams that have infinite resources that have figured out, ways to spend above the cap. And because of that, not everybody's working with the same, dollar figures. So that kind of muddies the water a little bit. But for the most part, to answer your question, yes, I think there's starting to become a little bit more of an understanding, hey, okay, player, X, who's a, high school quarterback, or player Y that's a transfer portal offensive lineman, you kind of understand this is what that type of player is going to typically command. Now obviously the more desperate a team is, maybe
sure,
to acquire that player, that price can get driven up a little bit. And that's where I think it's very important for us to not get swept away in the emotions of a recruiting race. We need to be, true to our evaluation model. That's how we go about things, is we kind of have a internal system built out to say, all right, we're grading this player as XYZ, and, based on their correlating position, this is what we figure this price range to be.
So when you evaluate, and you're going through the process of evaluation before you've got to conversations with these folks, are you slotting guys on your board based on what you think their dollar figure will be when it goes to market? Is that how you're doing? It's not just talent-wise, it's also fitting into those salary slots as well?
Yeah, yep, that's correct. So there's, right now I think, we're kind of in the middle of having some of those conversations with high school players. You're not having a whole lot of conversations with guys on your team about that right now, but high school players, rising seniors, we're kind of determining what we see their market value to be, and starting to engage in those conversations either with the players and their families directly, or if they have representation, starting to bring that to light, because I think they want to know right now. They want to know, okay, what is that associated figure? I'm getting ready to come on a visit here this summer, with you. What does that look like for me? Where do I stand to, be as a freshman or whatever? And I think the more honest, transparent conversations that you can have, the easier it is. The last thing that we want to do is get into a bunch of, leave it up to interpretation type conversations that, eventually will lead to misunderstandings and hurt feelings down the road. So we want to be upfront and honest, with that. We'll let everyone know where they're at. Sometimes that'll lead to, really good conversations. Sometimes it takes you out of the running for a player. Sometimes it kind of lets you know, what's important in a player's recruitment. Can that player more or less be bought? Or is money like really far down the list of things that matter to them? And so you understand, hey, okay, like as long as we're not getting severely outbid, we just got to show this player the right things that matter in his recruitment, in order to try to make them a mountaineer.
So you feel that's still an important part of the recruiting. It's not just we talk so much about the dollars. You think there's still stuff behind that other than just what's my offer, what's the dollar amount, what's next?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, if money gets to a certain stage, with one program versus the others, I do think there's certain implications, certain financial decisions that a player or his family is going to have to make, whether that's, a school is so far below everybody else that they kind of get cut out, or a school so far above everyone else that they can, for lack of a better term, be bought. But yeah, I think for the most part, like it's still the nuts and bolts of, okay, what type of locker room am I walking into? Do I like the campus? More specifically, do I like my coach? Is this scheme fit me? Am I going to get developed and have a chance to have success at this level and maybe have a chance to play in the NFL?
Chuck, is there a similar value per position that's evolving in college compared to the NFL? So NFL, quarterback's going to make the most, right? Then your tackles. Is that also being replicated in college football as well?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's pretty consistent because, while the highest of the highs, right, in the NFL, quarterbacks are getting paid the most. If you look across all 32 NFL teams, whether it be a guy's on a rookie contract or, a guy's signing a lower end free agent deal, just because they happen to play that position doesn't automatically qualify them to be the highest paid player on the team, right?
Correct.
So it really all goes back to how much is this guy going to help us win? Where are they at in their career and their ability to help us win? So if all things are equal, if all, if I grade this guy the highest I can grade him and he's playing whatever position and that position has a higher associated value than a different position, then yeah, the quarterbacks, the tackles, the pass rushers, those are going to, top out at a higher level. But, again, it's going to be a little bit more associated with what is that player's impact on us winning football games.
At West Virginia, what are the most coveted positions?
All of them. There's not a position on the field where, we are going to de-emphasize, that position's importance to us winning football games. And that's what makes football unique is you need all 11 guys on each side of the ball to do their job in order for you to have success. There's different roles that each player plays within his position. Depending on the call that, could either, have him kind of be like the featured, highlighted, sexy part of the play or the, really underrated part of the play that, the fan is never really going to notice, but they're, instrumental in that play having success, that play, going for a touchdown or that play resulting in a strip sack. So everybody's got to work in cohesion. And it's like watching a ballet or a musical performance up on stage, right? Like when it's in sync, when it looks right, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to watch. And when it's not that way, it can look like a big cluster and it's pretty easy to spot out, hey, okay, like, this guy's not at his landmark, he's got to be another yard or two off here and understanding the bigger picture as to why, once I think guys get into that second year, third year of being in a system and really understanding, hey, okay, this is why I'm doing this certain thing within the play, and they can execute their assignment, that's when it starts to become a thing of beauty.
I think the musical analogy is really good. It's like an orchestra.
Yeah.
Like if someone is out of tune and keeps playing the wrong note, the whole thing sounds bad.
Absolutely.
And football, we watch tape all the time, and you just look at a play and go like, that play was there, but this dude just 1 second longer, if he would have held his block 1 second long, that thing's gone. No one really notices that. They just see the running back running into a defensive player because that guy just didn't hold that guy off 1 more second.
We often say it's amazing anything works ever. There's so much that has to go into a play. It's remarkable that things work. Can we talk some specifics for a minute in terms of last season into this season? So we'll talk about speed here in a minute because Rich has continually talked about the need to get faster at all positions. But let's start up front with that offensive line, how important that is and was in this offseason and going out and finding not only some more physicality, but some experience as well. You've got a wide-ranging group of guys that are experienced, mixed in with Kevin Brown, who was one of the headliners coming in this freshman class. What was the goal of the offensive line recruiting, and where do you think that landed?
Yeah, I think the goal going into the offseason was, we definitely wanted to add some experience. We were going to lose some guys up front, to expiring eligibility. So we knew we had to, get some guys in here that had experience, whether that was, coming from another school, coming from a junior college, whatever. So we wanted to add experience. We wanted to get bigger. We wanted to add size. We felt like at times last year we just lacked, a little bit of size and strength to reestablish and move the line of scrimmage. So we went out and we identified some guys and signed some guys that we were really excited about that, kind of checked all three of those boxes, guys that were bigger, guys that had experience, and guys that, we felt like we're going to be able to be grown men in the trenches and reestablish a line of scrimmage in the run game, hold their own in the pass game. I think there was probably a stat out there at one point, like some of the transfers that we signed had given up, in their careers, like a combined 1 sack. So, I think we got some really well-rounded players, up front on the offensive line that are bringing a variety of different experiences from where they're coming from. And again, just overall, we got bigger and stronger. So we're happy about it.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like that group was constructed pretty well in terms of, so Kevin Brown, a high-level freshman recruit, you bring him in, he can compete right away. Couple guys from the FBS level, but a lower level, the Jack State guys coming in, guys that knew this system, had played for this coaching staff, and had achieved a really high level. Also some Power 4 guys mixed in. So it looks like you've kind of gone all the way around and circled it from all angles. Fair?
Yeah. I think we got guys from, we got guys from Jacks, we got Carson Cassidy coming over from UConn, Devin Voss coming from Kansas State, just a variety of different levels of experience that were brought in over here. West King coming from, Wyoming. So we brought in different guys from different levels. And I think they all are going to bring, something, from their previous school. There's a reason they had success wherever they were at. And so we're really excited about all the additions.
Mixed in with Nick Cray and Landon Livingston, of course, who are back from last year and know this system from that. Yeah.
Well, last year it was, I think Landon Livingston had 1 career start. I think you guys had 1 career start on the offensive line going into last year's opening game. And this year, depending on how it falls out, you'll have over 100 career starts, which just makes a night and day difference. 3 guys before the game is brought to us by Jan Dill's Attorneys at Law. They go across the board when it comes to various legal services, from personal injury to veterans benefits and Social Security claims. Here's a client's testimonial. Thomas wrote in, "I tried on my own for 3 decades to obtain disability for service-related issues incurred while I was serving offshore during Vietnam without success. I found Jan Dill's online, signed a contract to take my case. They did 100% of the initial paperwork. Only delays throughout the entire 5+ years were created and caused by the Veterans Administration process. After denials and delays, Jan and her team acquired 100% service-connected disability rating for me. I was moved to tears along the way by the care, tenacity, professionalism of every person that was on my team. The attorney who represented me was the best I've ever had in my entire life." That from Thomas, a client of Jan Dill's Attorneys at Law, located in West Virginia, serving clients in all 50 states. 3 guys also brought to us by Lou Wendell Marine Sales. Now, you're from the Baltimore area, and that's not too far from water. You a water guy growing up?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, water guy. Lou Wendell Marine Sales, the #1 pontoon boat dealer in the state of West Virginia, sell Avalon pontoon boats manufactured 100% right here in the United States, and the only Honda Marine premium dealer. Now is the biggest selection that they'll have all season long in every type, whether it be a boat, whether it be all of the supplies and the equipment that you need. So visit LouWendellMarineSales.com. I've been told from more than one person that you do extremely well in dealing with agents. Like, Chuck does just a great job of having the conversations and talking with you. Where's that come from?
I don't know. I think the this is kind of like who I am, so I don't really, try to put any sort of effort into it. But I've been told like one of the biggest things that I guess plays well in my dealings with agents is, not getting too fired up, because there can be some pretty contentious comments that get made at times, and obviously there are things that happen fast at certain points. So I guess just not losing my cool plays a big part of that. But I try to walk into most of those conversations with a little bit of an idea in mind, a little bit of a game plan of how I want that conversation to go, and know that there's certain ways that you can try to steer that conversation in order to extrapolate whatever information you need, or try to get things as close to the end point as
Right.
you can get them to. I guess that's probably why.
Okay. Not to get anyone in trouble, but is it fair to say that you are receiving calls from agents on a regular basis, even when the season is going on, saying, psst, psst, hey, Chuck, what if Johnny John was in the portal? Would you guys be interested? You get those calls?
We get those calls, and obviously you got to be careful, because anytime it gets to that point, that's where you start to cross the line into tampering. But typically the way that those calls go are, you receive a call from an agent saying, hey, just wanted to let you know, I've signed a few more clients this month, and I got Johnny from this school over here, and this guy from that school over there. So you make a note of it, and there's no harm, no foul in evaluating those guys at a certain point. And then if that guy does decide to put his name in the portal, when the appropriate time comes, then I might think back and be like, oh yeah, you know what? I think so and so called me about this kid. Let me reach out to him and see if that's still his client. So
Yeah. Planting the seeds.
Yeah.
It's all seed planting. A coach sends a tape in on a prospective recruit. Let's just say the kid's whatever. Let's say he's getting close. So let's say he's a sophomore, junior, whatever it might be. What is your internal process of evaluation to determine whether you begin the process of contacting, coming up for an official, unofficial, whatever? How's that work? How many eyes are evaluating before you say, yes, we'd be willing to offer?
That's a great question. I think like when I first started doing this at Clemson back in 2015, like I think that answer would probably have been somewhere in the neighborhood of like anywhere from 4 to 7 people are probably watching that player before deciding, yes, we're going to extend an offer. Now, because of you have a little bit of a separation from everything beforehand was all. You had the coaching staff, and then you had the recruiting staff. And now within the last, 5 years, I think there's really been a, separation a little bit from your recruiting staff to your personnel staff. So you got some places, I think, in the country have the authority to issue those offers as a personnel staff. And, we have a little bit of that freedom. We try to, cross-check with our coaches and our staff there, but it could be anywhere from 4 to 5 to 6 sets of eyes are putting notes down on a player before issuing an offer, or it could be as simple as 1 to 2. I get a coach or an assistant coach that, hey, check this guy out, I think he's pretty good, so and so sent him to me, I check him out, hey, yeah, let's offer him. Or someone sends someone directly to Coach Rod. Obviously he's got the green light to do that whenever he wants. So he might just get his eyes on him and say, yep, we're going to offer this kid. So I think that process has kind of sped up a little bit in terms of like the whole evaluation process. I think there's a couple of different ways that we get names. It may be a high school coach that we have a relationship with that says, hey, I have this kid, he's a sophomore, he's a junior, whatever. I think you need to check him out. He's going to be pretty good. Or it could be, we pay for all sorts of different recruiting services, allow us to go out and identify, find names. And then we have a internal software system that we're going to push those guys through, and it can go from, the student coach at that position up to the GA, up to the assistant coach, up to the, full-time position coach. Probably want to cross-check it, with someone on the personnel staff, cross-check it with the offensive or defensive coordinator. And then really I think the only time for the most part that we're going to get, the head coach involved now is, okay, is this guy, someone that we're looking to bring in on an official visit? Or, hey, hey, coach, this guy's getting ready to come on campus. We're going to spend the day with him. It's going to be a pretty elaborate type of unofficial visit. You need to know who this guy is. If sometimes he's already seen that film, but if he hasn't, want to make sure that he's putting eyes on him so he knows.
Let's talk about some of that software and analytics and how important that is, and AI, how that's starting to come in. How much do you use and / how important is it to use those tools in terms of, let's take you can take Portal or High School, that you're entering in certain characteristics or numbers that you want, baseline metrics, and then it's spitting back out targets. How often does that come up? How often do you use that?
I think the biggest place where analytics is getting involved is trying to really quantify things that beforehand were subjective measurements. It's taken something where if I'm watching a player on film and I think that player has got really good speed, that's my eye, that's my memory bank telling me, well, this guy's somewhere in the 75th, 80th percentile of all the guys I've watched at this position, right? So he's not average, he's a little bit above average. But now you're taking that kind of subjective measurement that's all can become human error, based on a variety of factors, level of competition, or just maybe the last 10 guys that you watched prior to evaluating that one player, and you're able to objectively define, certain measurements like change of direction, like linear speed. That's probably the biggest place where there's been a little bit of a revolution in that area, probably in the last 4 to 5 years. I've been lucky that everywhere that we've been able to try to implement some, I don't know if cutting edge is the right word, but we've been able to lean into that probably a little bit more than the traditional old school method of evaluating players. And so allowing those processes to take place and lean on, certain analytics, lean on certain AI measurements, for, how to quantify certain things in the recruiting process, that just helps, I think, take some of the subjectivity out of it. You still want subjective opinions. I want to know what the head coach's opinion is. I want to know what the position coach's opinion is, of the player, but sometimes it does help to, black and white objectify what some of those traits are.
Yeah. And those show up as what? Percentiles? Like change of direction would be what? What's the metric that it's using there?
It's interesting. There's a ton of different things that you can quantify now. I think the easiest one is probably linear speed. So this is, cool story that talking with Mike Joseph, he was the one that let me know this, but the 40-yard dash, if you guys aren't familiar, is...
I run 4.4.
You run 4.4?
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Do you get a 10-yard head start?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. But so the 40-yard dash came about when Paul Brown was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And at the time, the average net punt in the NFL was 39.5 yards. So he was trying to figure out, okay, who do I throw out there, at gunner on punt team and, line the guys up, made them run 40 yards and timed them all. And the fastest.
So it was coverage based, not offensive based.
It was special teams coverage based. Yep. So that's how the 40-yard dash came about. Okay. And so that's still an objectified measurement of speed today at the NFL Combine. And I think there's a lot of things that are good and make sense about that. Obviously, it's cool. There's sex appeal. It drives a lot of eyeballs for TV when the Combine comes around. But when we're talking about in-game speed, linear speed, you don't get a controlled environment to open up for 40 yards very often in the context of a football game, right? So we're trying to figure out, okay, in a 15-yard, 20-yard, 25-yard area, what is this guy able to open up to? And we have, wearable devices that our players wear every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it kind of creates consistent messaging. Hey, okay, this is what our players are doing on a daily basis. This is what our players are doing in practice, in game. And we're able to take video components and figure out, hey, okay, this recruit is, he's playing at, anywhere from 19.5 to 21 miles an hour when he's opening up. And, okay, now we can correlate that at this position. He's lining up. He looks like this player. He looks like that player. We don't have a guy on the team that runs this type of speed. Even given the opportunity, we don't have a guy that runs this fast. This guy would be the fastest player in the room today if we signed him. So that's probably the number one area where that stuff shows up. But, change of direction, there's a lot of things that are force-based involved with that. So there are things that you can measure either with an offense or defensive lineman that are kind of force-based in nature. And, it can tell you how much power that player is generating, given their size, their weight, and how much they're able to, move a player that's in front of them. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah. So you're getting a little exit velo there, like to take a baseball term. You're
Yeah.
starting to get that stuff is filtering its way over that you can start to stack and analyze and evaluate. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, it's not end all be alls. It's not, hey, we are strictly working on this one piece of information, but it's another data point, right? Yeah. It's another objective data point that we are able to add into the equation to try to make a more well-rounded decision.
It would seem it would really help in the sorting process as well, in the early stages when you're trying to weed out certain guys, right? You can put some baselines in place that you can use, then move forward with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the more that we advance with that kind of stuff, I think there's going to be, as there's consistent things that arise, whether it's an indicator of success or an indicator of failure, there will be certain things that we look at, based on the position a player plays that, hey, okay, like if I think the Seattle Seahawks are really good, they need, linebackers that are, height X, wingspan X, and have a short shuttle lower than whatever. Yeah. So they've found something, within their data, how they evaluate that says within the structure of our defense, we need players that fit this type of criteria. And if they're outside of this box, it doesn't mean they can't be successful for somebody else, but it's not what we're looking for, right? And in a world of trying to really, narrow down a list of thousands upon thousands of options that are out there for you, it's just, it helps to kind of narrow your focus.
An invaluable tool.
Streamlines you.
And what saves a ton of time, right? You've been at Clemson. They've won national championships. As you said, you were at K-State for 4 years, which I think is very similar to West Virginia in a lot of ways, a blue-collar kind of mentality that they run their program. Obviously, Oklahoma and the tradition that it has. What gives you hope or confidence that West Virginia will have success here going forward?
Oh, man. There's a lot of reasons, but I think one of the first things that comes to mind is, if we're trying to sell a recruit on having, a positive college playing experience, there's two things that kind of come to mind for me. Number one is having, the opportunity to play and get developed, right? And number two is, being in, a really cool game day atmosphere. Like I wouldn't want to go and play in front of 1,000 fans in a 50,000, stadium, 50,000 person stadium. We got, I think, what our capacity is 60,000. They sell out every time, and the fans are going from the opening kick to the end of the game. So that's a big thing for us. Is our game days are a huge sell. So trying to get guys here, whether it's for their unofficial visit, game day unofficial visit, or their official visit, making sure they experience a game day, because I think that sells itself. The place sells itself. The fans helps sell this. But just the opportunity to get developed by the coaches that we have. Coach Rodriguez is going on, I think, his 30th year as a head coach. Some of the players that he's developed that have had tremendous success either at the college ranks or the NFL or both. That speaks for itself. And this place is, I think, 15th all time in college football wins. So we've had every opportunity to have great success here, and there's no reason why that's any different today than it was the first time that Coach was here.
Right.
So I think once we get those on-field results that we're looking for, which I know are coming down the pipeline here, this will be a place that everybody wants to play at. It's our job, I think, as a recruiting personnel staff to help assist the coaches in making sure guys get here, because I think once they get here, we got as good of a shot as any.
Where does the backyard brawl rank among experiences for you? Because obviously you've been in high-profile games. Where did that one fit in?
Man, that was really cool. There were so many things about that game. That were cool. First off, I think anytime you have a high-stakes game that starts when the sun is up and finishes when the sun is down, that's picturesque. That's a cool thing. That's a cool thing to have happen.
Yes.
So that part obviously was really cool, but that was a unique rivalry that you felt the gravity of it that week. You felt the gravity of it as the fans were starting to pour in Saturday morning and pour in the night before on Friday night. We had a really good turnout there from a recruit standpoint. But that was just, I don't know. That's up there. I think obviously winning, being a part of a national championship team, that's got to be probably number one for me. But behind that, man, that game is up there, because that was just, there were a lot of emotions. Obviously, we felt good. We were up. I think there was a play early on in the first half that don't know why we didn't get an extra play there to maybe try to kick a field goal, but being down in the second half, coming back, forcing overtime, just so many plays that stick out, and man, what an unbelievable game.
Helped you with this recruiting class? I would imagine you had a ton of people. Did you think it eventually got you guys?
Yeah, that was a huge catalyst for us, for sure. Being able to beat our rival, have that big victory at home. That was a huge catalyst for, we already had a large portion of the class together at that point, but I think we'd probably go on to sign, close to 10 or 12 more guys as the season went. So that was huge in terms of just, retaining guys that were, receiving interest from other programs, and then maybe flipping some guys down the stretch.
The summer is quote unquote the off season, but it really isn't. How important are the next several months for you? How many kids will be coming in on unofficials? What are you guys doing right now? Yeah,
so right now, coaches are out on the road, seeing our top 27 high school guys, getting in the house, going and seeing them, at their spring practices or track events or, baseball games or whatever. But, kind of moving forward here, fast forwarding a few weeks, we're going to start to get camps going. Camps are a huge evaluation tool for us to get guys here on campus and be able to work with them, one-on-one, and, see them do different drills and, see how they respond and take hard coaching. So that'll kind of start the process for, the next wave, the 28s to 29s. But we'll also have a handful of really good 27 players on campus too at those camps that we're really excited to evaluate and see in person. But then obviously, kind of coinciding with that, you're going to have, 3 or 4 weeks of official visits. Most of those will take place on the weekends. But, we're going to have probably, I'd say, anywhere from, 50 to, 60 guys more or less that are going to be coming through here on official visits here, over the next month.
All right, before we let Chet get out here, we got to go back. Let's go back on the field for a second. Rich has stated defensively wanted to obviously get bigger, faster, stronger, but bigger on the back end specifically. coming out of spring, what do you think about defensive guys that were added? What did you see coming out of the spring? How do you feel about that side of the ball?
Yeah, I think, bigger, faster, stronger, that was kind of an emphasis for us. It's always going to be an emphasis for you, but specifically this offseason in terms of who we targeted, who we brought in. And that was, I think, really a big part of who we identified, who we signed, both in the high school signing class and in the portal and junior college ranks. I think coming out of spring, we're definitely bigger, we're definitely faster. Specifically in the secondary, last year we had guys that were good players that were in good position at times, and they just lost the battle of length, and that's what can happen in this game. And so for us, we had a couple of guys that are 6'1" pushing 6'2" or 6'2" pushing 6'3" that we've added both in the corner and the safety room. So we're not going to be lacking length there anymore. I know that.
Let's talk about one guy in particular, Matt Sieg. Obviously, a lot of attention coming in as a freshman. He's really interesting and that can play both sides of the ball, and Rich has not been shy about talking about looking for multiple players that play both sides. How much is that a factor in this? Not just Sieg specifically, but as you move forward, guys that can play multiple positions.
Yeah, so Matt was obviously a really good high school athlete. Primarily really played, kind of quarterback, that offensive athlete for his high school. And the big thing that was, attractive about him during the process was that, okay, here's a guy that's a great athlete, has a propensity for, making big plays with the ball in his hand on the offense and defensive side of the ball, has a knack for finding the end zone. But, when you turn on the defensive film, he wasn't afraid to hit. He wasn't afraid to strike guys. That's always the gamble that you run, I think, when you take a really good offensive player and try to convert them to a defensive player, is if you don't know whether or not they're willing to hit, sometimes those plays don't work out. But that was never going to be a concern of ours with Matt, because he showed that on film. But in the current day and age of having limited roster numbers, I think it's really important for us to identify and find guys that are just really good athletes, really good football players, regardless of what position they play, because they can probably help you out on the opposite side of the ball, in a limited capacity or in a full-time, playing both ways capacity. So we're always identifying and evaluating players that, maybe it's a wide receiver that can play defense, or, corner that can play receiver. Maybe it's a linebacker that can, help play fullback or tight end, or, whatever the case may be. So those guys are always, going to earn brownie points for us, and it's something that we're trying to identify for sure.
All right, couple more here. Let's talk, speaking of bigger, faster, stronger, the receiver room got bigger, faster, stronger there. You talk about Prince Strong, talk about Francis, talk about our guy, friend of the program, Jaden Bray. Talk about the receivers for a second. What was the goal there? How do you think you landed?
I think it landed tremendously. We definitely sought out guys that had a little bit more size. When we lost Jaden a year ago, I think we felt a little bit of lack of size on the perimeter, both in the passing game and in the run blocking game. So that was a goal of ours. Was obviously you want guys that are a little bit bigger, a little bit faster from a receiving standpoint. But in order for this offense to have the success it's capable of, you need to have guys that are willing and capable blockers in the slot and on the perimeter too. So that was what we were looking for, was guys that obviously had the requisite speed to be able to be difference makers in this offense, but also guys that had size, that had length, that were going to be able to hold up in the run blocking game, but also have a little bit more of a throwing window in the passing game too.
Yeah, and we'll have you back later this summer and go through some more guys, because we could talk Hutchins and his speed, or Epps and his wiggle. There's a lot to like about that receiver room. Go to the running backs for a second. Again, don't have time to go through every guy, but you have a nice balance of veteran and rookie there with Cook and Latimer, just to name a couple there. You have to be thrilled about where the running back room is.
Yeah, no, we're really excited. And that was a room that, last year we had a ton of injuries. We had a ton of guys, stepping up and having to play. And this year, we're really excited about all the guys that we have in that room. There's a variety of different experience levels. There's a variety of different, sizes, variety of different talents that we have, guys that have home run speed, guys that have, do it all, guys that can just absolutely run you over. And so I think we got a really well-balanced stable there in the running back room. Really excited to see what those guys can do.
All right,
Jump in, Michael Hawkins.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about quarterbacks as the last piece there. Same thing there. A mix of experience, youth, skill set. Max Brown returned. Scotty Fox, who we just had on this program, certainly gained a load of experience last year. He's looked like a different player this year. And you bring in Mike Hawkins from your old stomping grounds in Oklahoma.
Yeah, no, when we found out that Mike had entered the portal, that was exciting. That was something that Coach Alley and I were able to talk with Coach Rodriguez and read about. It was just, hey, here was our experience with him when he was a freshman over at Oklahoma. So have a little bit of inside knowledge of what we're getting there. But really happy with the way all those guys competed this spring. That was another position where we just had a ton of injuries going on last year, so I don't know if we'll ever see a season like that again where you had that many injuries. But no, we're really excited. Got a ton of different arm talents that that we have in that room. Different levels of athleticism and guys that can run the football. So I think everything that we've tried to identify and build out and bring into that room, we have it there, and every position that we've talked about here today. Really excited with where the team is at. So
I want a final question for you then. With that being said, so you're kind of like, in some ways, kind of like a chef bringing all the ingredients together, but then you have to put them together and they have to come together to make it to work. What has you most excited about this upcoming season? What are you most looking forward to seeing when it's game day?
That's a great question. I think that the team that we've assembled here this year, it didn't take very long to realize just from, their actions in the weight room, their actions in winter conditioning, even ahead of, getting into the, full-on spring practices, that we got a locker room full of guys that love football, that love the process. We got like I've talked about ad nauseum, we got, variety of different, experiences coming from kind of all over the place. And I think, looking back, at last year and seeing, okay, we had a team that was 4-8. How can we learn and how can we grow from that? You don't have success without having failure. And so I think that was a big thing for us to navigate. And, we've kind of, to your point, brought in all the right ingredients. We have the coaches to be able to do it. And, beyond just the, again, threshold of necessary required talent that you need to have to play this game and be able to win in this league, man, we got a bunch of guys that love football. We got a bunch of guys that we got dogs, but we got guys that, we got guys that love to work. And, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, that's what, this program is about. I think that's what our fans identify with, is being a blue collar program, having that hard edge, right? That's what we have this year. So excited about that.
Makes us excited. Makes these folks excited. That's what it's all about.
Good final pitch right there.
Good final pitch.
Nice.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chuck Lillie, thanks so much for your time, buddy.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We're going to give you, by the way, his microphone etiquette, stupendous.
Really
Was that good?
Well, we just had Gavin Kelly on, baseball player, who we thought was the best we had, and he was very good. You might have surpassed Gavin there. That was elite mic management by you.
Yeah,
well done.
That was well done on your part. For those that don't know, like, if you don't wear headsets, you have to be very conscious of how you handle the microphone, because these are unique microphones and unidirectional, and you were stupendous. 5-star
very
elite.
coachable.
Elite.
Very coachable.
5-star.
No
It'll
question.
Be a 5-star microphone.
No question.
Thanks, buddy. We appreciate it.
You guys. Thanks.
Three Guys Before the Game, brought to us by Gomart. Get the Gomart Rewards card. Download the app. Go to Gomart.com for details. Just go to the App Store. Three Guys brought to us by Lou Wendell Marine Sales in St. Albans. They sell family fun. Visit LouWendellMarineSales.com. By Tudor's Biscuit World. Chuck can eat too. Start your day the homemade way with a Tudor's Biscuit. By Jan Dills, attorneys at law. They won't take no for an answer. By Conley CPA Group, providing value beyond numbers. And by WVU Medicine, the exclusive healthcare provider for all Mountaineers, including you. Special thanks to our producer, Jake, For Chuck and Brad, that's it. 3 Guys Before the Game, episode number 716 in the book. We'll see you down the road.